Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's Trump Watch. Lots going on during the past week with respect to President Trump and people in his administration. Of course, there always are lots of things going on with the Trump administration, as you all know. What I thought I would do this week is not so much delve deeply into a particular issue, but just highlight various things that are happening and give you a short analysis from a libertarian perspective. Of course, that's the perspective you're not going to get in the mainstream press. So let's begin with the so-called threat of a shutdown of the federal government. We go through this charade periodically, and here's my prediction. It'll never happen. The government shutdown will not occur. And if it does occur, I think they'll just go ahead and recall all the federal employees, pay them back pay, and so they essentially get a free vacation. Now, Trump is announcing something different, though. He says that if the shutdown happens, he's going to use it as an opportunity to lay off permanently federal employees, which would be a good thing. I mean, that's what he promised to do, downsize government. That's what Doge was all about and so forth. And I don't understand what all the preoccupation on the part of Trump is about with respect to this shutdown. He has an opportunity to shut down the federal government, or at least what they call the non-essential aspects of the federal government. Well, if they're non-essential, what's wrong with shutting them down? And yeah, permanently lay off people. This notion that every time they pay back pay for people that have been, temporarily suspended during the shutdown is ridiculous. So here's the opportunity. Trump ought to be looking at this as an opportunity to shut down all the non-essential functions of government on a permanent basis. But instead, he's anguishing and trying to figure out how a way can be approached to reach a deal with the Democrats to avoid the shutdown. I say let it shut down. And I think that Trump's going to end up making some kind of deal with the Democrats that's going to avoid the shutdown and keep the government going. Now, interestingly enough, there's also a big controversy with respect to Argentina, because Argentina, the president there, Milei, who is libertarian-oriented, he laid off massive numbers of people, brought the inflation rate down from, I forget what it was, like 250% down to, 30%, something like that. And but there's been economic crises, naturally enough. People think that libertarianism is a way to resolve the difficulties of socialism. Well, it's not. That's not what libertarianism is all about. We don't provide a quick fix cure for decades and decades of socialism. For example, let's say that a government 50 years ago confiscates 90% of people's income and uses it to expand the federal government bureaucracy. So it uses all this tax money to pay generous salaries and so forth. And so you've got all these people working for the federal government, okay? Then along comes a libertarian 50 years later and says, well, we're going to just do the reverse. We're going to lay off 90% of the federal workers. They're all going to go into the private sector, and people are going to be free to keep 90% of their income. All right, now, so what do you think would happen? Well, clearly all those people working for the government are going to be laid off. There's going to be some financial difficulties there as they try to find jobs in the private sector, which they will, because now people are free to keep their own money. They're out spending it in the way they want it instead of having it taken from them. But there's that period where millions of people are suddenly unemployed, and so the statists will say, "Oh, see, libertarianism didn't fix the problem. Look at all this suffering going on." Well, there has to be a period of time in which you're removing these people from the public sector, and they're finding jobs in the private sector. But that may take some time. And what the staters are saying, no, because this is so difficult, we need to maintain this status system, even though the status system is horrendous, causing massive poverty, massive suffering among people, lower standards of living. And so, of course, the original problem is that the government should never have moved into that status direction at all. And that certainly applies to Argentina with the people, the Perón people, but it also applies to the U.S. government. I mean, Perón was really no different principle from Franklin Roosevelt. So the United States was converted into a massive welfare state, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, welfare, subsidies, grants, departments of education, labor, commerce, all the whole administrative state, the welfare state, and then later the conversion to a national security state. So if you're going to restore the original founding system of the United States of a limited government republic, which means dismantling the Pentagon, the CIA, and the NSA, and just having a relatively small basic military force, which is what I favor, and if you were going to go to a truly free system based on private charity, you get rid of the whole welfare state, the whole administrative regulatory state, and so forth. Well, that would clearly constitute some problems for people that are on the dole, and the military dole, the welfare state dole, the regulatory dole, or take the drug war. Think how many people are dependent on the drug war. And so if you legalize drugs, which is the only solution to this thing, the people are going to be crying are federal prosecutors, because they're no longer needed. They can be laid off. I mean, many of them thrive off this thing. Federal judges too, especially in the borderland regions. Federal judges get their generous tax-supported salaries because they spend so much of their time on the drug war or immigration cases and so forth. In other words, meaningless work. But in the meantime, President Trump is offering to bail out Malay because he likes Malay, and Malay's having some political difficulties, and so Trump's using the U.S. government to bail him out. That apparently in Argentina they're having trouble, monetary problems. Remember, he had promised to abolish the central bank. He didn't do that. And so they've tried to bolster the Argentine peso, but they're using their reserves, their dollar reserves. Those are going extremely low. People are fleeing the Argentine peso, and so Malay is having both economic difficulties, financial difficulties, or at least Argentina is, and political difficulties. They lost in recent provincial elections. He's now facing midterm elections. So Trump is coming to the rescue with U.S. taxpayer money. Not really sure exactly what he's planning on doing, whether it's a direct cash transfer to bolster their reserves or using the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank or whatever. But in any event, Trump is coming to the rescue, which is interesting because Republicans are always saying that they oppose bailouts, government bailouts, and favor the free enterprise system, And so here Trump is using the U.S. government to bail out a foreign regime, even while there's so much suffering here in the United States because of tariffs, Trump's tariffs and trade wars. I mean, there's soybean farmers that are going bankrupt, and because of what's going on with Trump's trade war against China. I mean, a big part of their market was China, just like when Trump was president the first time, that American farmers were selling, wheat or some other crops into China, and then Trump started a trade war back then, and their market dried up, and a lot of them went bankrupt, and Trump said, well, I'll establish a welfare program for you, or what was the equivalent of a welfare program. And that's what he's saying that he might do here with soybean farmers. And the soybean farmers are upset because China's now selling or buying soybeans from Argentina because they can't get it from the United States. And so the soybean farmers are going bankrupt, saying, well, and now you're bailing out Argentina after we've lost our market on soybeans? And Trump is indicating that he might establish another welfare program for them with all his tax revenues. And of course, there's people suffering, Americans suffering from these tariffs. Trump kept saying, "Oh, well, it's the foreigners that pay these things." That's nonsense. This is a sales tax. When you walk into a store and you buy something, you're paying that sales tax. And when you buy goods from overseas, you're paying a sales tax, and that sales tax goes to the U.S. government. And that's why. And Trump knows this because he's saying that he might use some of these tax revenues that he's collecting from people, including people that are just barely on the edge in this country. Paycheck to paycheck, small businesses, people that rely on these cheap, quality goods from China and other countries. They're going under. And so, people see this. We're bailing out Argentina. It just makes no sense. Okay, we've had another shooting. Certainly doesn't surprise me. A Michigan church, some 40-year-old guy, Iraq veteran. That doesn't surprise me either. The guy killed 4 people. He rammed his truck in there. He started shooting. He started a fire. 8 people were injured. They're trying to figure out what his motive is, but without knowing his motive, I'll give you my prediction. And you all know that I've addressed this in just recent Trump watches, and I invite you to go back and listen to the last 2 or 3. I've blogged on this. This has nothing to do with gun control. I mean, this is what the left always says. Oh, if only we had gun control. Well, they have gun control in churches. It's illegal to carry a gun into church. And this guy obviously says, well, I don't care what the law is. And that's the way these things always operate with gun control, is that if they're not going to obey a murder law, a law against murder, why are they going to obey a law that says you can't bring a gun into church or on a school? Remember, that guy in Minneapolis that went in there and started killing a bunch of children. And then you got the Charles Kirk killing. It all goes back to what I've been saying, and I won't go into detail again about this. And again, I invite you to read what I've been saying about this for several years now, that the real problem we face in this country are the off-kilter people. And this guy, I'm willing to bet, Iraq veteran, thank you for your service, and invaded a country that never attacked the United States. This was a clear war of aggression where soldiers were ordered to kill people that had never done anything against the United States in terms of violence and so forth. I mean, it's just legalized killing. And I think most soldiers are very conscientious. Now, clearly you've got some pathological killers that join the military that enjoy it. They don't have a conscience, or at least they don't appear to have a conscience. It's so deeply buried. But I think most soldiers have a conscience, and they're very conscientious. And so you go in there and you force people to kill people that don't deserve to be killed. And then thank them for their service. Let them board airplanes first at the airports and so forth, and honor and praise them. I think it's got to screw up a lot of people. So it doesn't surprise me when they say there's a huge soaring suicide rate among veterans. It doesn't surprise me at all, because I think that's the conscience operating. Even if it's at a subconscious level, it's eating away like an acid at people, and that's what really needs to be dealt with in the military, is dealing with the guilt that comes with killing people wrongfully. And they killed a lot of people there, and including the support troops. Even though if you didn't fire the bullet, you're supporting this type of thing. So this guy, I think, just went off the deep end. Just as like these other people do. I think this guy with Kirk, I don't think this is a political killing and free speech and respect for other people's views and all this. I think this guy, off kilter, got upset because he was involved in a gay relationship with a guy who was changing his gender, and he got the perception that Republicans hate gays and hate transgenders, and decided to wreak havoc against Charlie Kirk. And what good does it do? I mean, like I said in my previous Trump watches, this guy destroyed a life, and he's destroyed his own life. And he's brought untold suffering to Kirk's family and friends, and to his own family. And for what? He's 22 years old. He's going to spend the rest of his time in jail if he's not given the death penalty. with no possibility of parole. Why? I say because something's triggering off these off-kilter people. I think this Iraq veteran that just rammed his truck into this church is off-kilter. I think it's the same with this ICE guy. Look, the guy that kills, he threatened to kill ICE agents and ends up not killing any ICE agents, but kills migrants. I mean, that's off-kilter, you know. And then this guy killing the children, I guarantee you that had nothing to do with political discourse in American stuff. And so it all goes back to, why are these off-kilter people getting triggered? And it's what I've said in my work, that it's this society in which we live, the systems under which we live, that we all pretend that it's freedom, the welfare state, the administrative state, the regulatory state, the drug war, the national security state, the minimum wage, the whole foreign interventionism, killing people. The national security establishment is one of the biggest killing machines in history, including Iraq and Afghanistan, just killing millions and millions of people. And the idea always was, oh, this won't affect us here in America. No, as long as our troops are okay, relatively speaking, only a few of them getting killed. Go about your business, take your vacations. You live in a free society. Thank God you're an American, because at least you know you're free. And thank the troops for their service. And we could all just be living this life of the lie. And that's what it is. It's a life of the lie. It's not a free society. And they tighten the screws. They just keep tightening the screws. Troops in American cities, attacks on habeas corpus, due process of law, under this war on immigrants, where people go to church every Sunday and pray, God's second greatest commandment, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And then on Monday, man, it's get rid of those people. They're causing damage. This is why America's suffering all these woes. If we could just cleanse America of the illegals, man, we'd be fine. It's all nonsense. These are scapegoats, just scapegoats. There's things horribly wrong with this country, but it's not because of immigrants, legal or illegal. They're just the scapegoats, because people do not want to confront what happened to this country. With the national security state conversion, the conversion to a welfare state, to an administrative state, to a regulatory state, and with the screws tightening, and everybody convinced it's freedom. Thank God I'm an American, because at least I know I'm free. And everybody's convinced they're free. Do a survey. I guarantee you. Oh, I'm so grateful I live in a free society. It's just life of the lie. And I think that's these systems with their tightening of screws is what's triggering these off-kilter people. And I've said this for years now. Just be prepared. It's going to keep happening, because Americans are not ready to let go of these systems. They love their welfare state. They love their regulatory state, their national security state. The national security state's like a god to them. The Pentagon, the CIA, and the NSA, these are like gods, keeping them safe from the Muslims and the terrorists and the illegals and the Iranians and Russia and China and whatever. All these official enemies, drug dealers, narco-terrorists, the terrorists all over the world. I mean, the Pentagon, the CIA, and the NSA are like a god to people. And so people are not ready to let go of these systems. And I've argued now for 35 years here at FFF that these systems have destroyed our freedom. Now, notice I don't say they're hurting our freedom, because we don't have freedom in this country. That was one of my big revelations when I discovered libertarianism. I'd been lied to. And I think that's part of the recovery process, is to recognize the lie that Americans do not live in a free society. And convincing yourself that you do, all that does is lead to psychosis. And I think that psychosis manifests itself. Massive drug addiction in this country. In fact, they're now saying that what caused this guy in Michigan to do this was marijuana. Well, there's a lot of marijuana people that don't go do these kind of things. But they've got to find some other excuses for these off-kilter killings, because they don't want to confront the real cause, and that's the systems that everybody's just loving and praising and committed to and dedicated to, and that are convinced are part of a free society. The welfare state system, the national security state system, the Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and I mean, people are not ready to acknowledge that this was a huge mistake. moving America in this direction. And so they go off on all these, oh, well, it must be the marijuana. It's because we don't have gun control and stuff. Anything to avoid confronting what I'm saying is the real cause of this dysfunction. I mean, look at the suicide rates among young people. Soaring, skyrocketing, just like the veterans. Why? If this is such a great free society, why are people checking out of life early? Why are they checking out with drug addiction, drug use, mind-altering substances? I mean, the problem is obviously so large that they got to keep waging this war on drugs, which, of course, is just a great big racket, as we can see. They're just using the drug war consequences as a way to expand power. Now the power to kill suspected drug dealers with impunity. I mean, that's what bringing in the military is all about. And then designating them as terrorists, because they know that once they say terrorism, the Supreme Court is going to say, oh, no, we're backing off. Man, this is foreign policy. We can't get involved in what amounts to, in my opinion, legalized murder. And so it's very clever. You just couch it in terms of terrorism because they know the Supreme Court and the federal courts will back off. If it's just a drug war, they might not back off unless it's the military. If the military is involved, I guarantee you the federal courts are not going to get involved. Or even if one federal judge here and there gets involved, he's going to be overturned immediately on appeal or in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's not going to jack with the national security establishment, and we know that. We've known it for decades, ever since the Kennedy assassination, and even before. There is constant deference in Congress, the presidency, and the judiciary to the national security establishment. They are the overwhelming power within the federal government. But people are not ready to recognize that. So I say, well, just be prepared for more of these off-kilter shootings. But I guess we should also be prepared for all the ridiculous excuses for them, like marijuana or whatever. All right, so the federal government under the Trump administration, and I give some positive praise to the Trump administration, cut a deal with Amazon. The Biden administration had sued Amazon, monopoly, that they were engaged in unfair practices, people couldn't find how to cancel and so forth. But the real thing that's going on here is that whenever you see a big successful business, the statists, especially statists on the left, Democrats, say, oh, well, that's a monopoly. That's really bad. It never occurs to them that that business is big, huge, because it has satisfied consumers. I mean, Amazon revolutionized our lives. I remember when Amazon just started selling books, and it was amazing what they were doing with just selling books. How they get your book in 2 days, and the process of ordering was so simple. And then all of a sudden, well, I mean, you can buy anything on Amazon. I mean, this has tremendously improved the standard of living of the American people. But the status says, oh, if it's big, it must be a monopoly. It's ridiculous. A monopoly is like the Postal Service. Notice that the statists never want to touch that. That's where the law prohibits competition. Well, the law doesn't prohibit competition against Amazon. People are free to compete against Amazon. Oh, yeah, they're big. Well, get in there. But big businesses go out of business all the time. I mean, if you go back to like the top 20 companies in the Fortune 500 30 years ago, I'm willing to bet that none of them, or at most 2 or 3 of them, are still there. That's just market forces. That's just laws of supply and demand. And but they go after them. Well, to the Trump administration's credit, they reached a deal. To their discredit, they required Amazon to pay a fine. I forget how much it is, but billions, maybe a couple billion or something, which is a lot of money for all of us. But for Amazon, nothing. It's like less than 1% or something of their gross sales. They don't care. But, well, I guess anybody would care if it's a couple $1 billion. But so Trump should have just dismissed the charges, or the Trump administration, the Justice Department should have just dismissed the case. But they instead entered into a deal. And Amazon, I'm sure, is happy with the deal. It's over. But the former director of the Securities and Exchange Commission, I forget what her name was, Khan, She's terribly upset about it because she had brought this lawsuit. I think it was the SEC she was in charge of, but in any event, that case is settled. All right, so now there's also the Trump battle against the Colombian president. I think his name is Petro, which is really weird that he's saying that Colombia is not fighting enough in the war on drugs. I mean, if you go back and see this program Narcos on Netflix. Fantastic series if you've never seen it, and then the subsequent series is just as good, Narcos Mexico. But the Narcos series I think is 3 seasons, and a lot of it revolves around Colombia, the drug war in Colombia. This was like 50 years ago, where they were going after a big drug lord called Carlos Escobar. I mean, and Escobar was like a billionaire in his day, selling drugs. I don't know what he was selling. I think it was cocaine. The guy was a genius in terms of selling drugs into the United States, and so they targeted him. And just like all the publicity today that you hear, it was all oriented toward Escobar. And if we can only get Escobar, we win the war on drugs. It'll stop the drugs from coming into the United States, because this guy had really, consolidated the drug sales into the United States. He's making a killing. And so they finally cornered the guy and killed him. And with the help of the Colombian officials, and there was all the praise, in the newspapers here in the United States were going nuts. Big major victory in the war on drugs. Ridiculous. Because as soon as they kill one, he's replaced by others, and then there's gang warfare to determine who's going to take power to replace Escobar. And here we are today, with federal judges, federal prosecutors, DEA, Homeland Security, all saying the same thing that was being said 50 years ago. And now I think the Trump administration has revoked the visa of the Colombian president to enter the United States, because he went to the United Nations and apparently, from what I can tell, advocated that U.S. troops disobey orders to kill people there in the Caribbean, which is what the military's been doing there to fight the war on drugs. And as y'all know, I've been writing on this, emphasizing that, in my opinion, this is just legalized murder. They don't have a moral or legal right to kill suspected drug users or drug possessors or drug distributors. And especially because the New York Times reports that this boat that they blasted out of the water, or one of the boats they blasted out, was turning around and heading back to Venezuela. I mean, that's the equivalent of shooting somebody in the back, which is absolutely prohibited under U.S. law. But because they couch it in terms of, war on terrorism, narco-terrorism, that they say, we can do this. And so this Colombian president, apparently, if I get it right, was advocating that U.S. soldiers disobey those orders. And he's absolutely right. Soldiers are supposed to disobey illegal orders. They won't do it. The military is very loyal to their hierarchy. They will follow orders. If they're told to invade Venezuela, they will obey orders, just like they obeyed orders to invade Iraq. They should have disobeyed those orders too, but they don't. Their loyalty is to the president. They take an oath to support and defend the Constitution, but in their minds, when they support the democratically elected president of the United States, they're supporting and defending the Constitution. So, but the horrible, dark irony of this is that this war on drugs has gone on forever, and it will go on forever until the American people finally say, this is one system we're going to stop. And it needs to stop. It has caused so much death and destruction, and all it does is give U.S. officials an excuse. Look at all the drug lords. Look at the violence of the drug lords. We need to expand our power. We need to be able to kill more people. We need to put troops in the American cities. Look at the crime rate and so forth. Well, if you legalize drugs, 90% of the crime in America would disappear, because it's all rooted in this drug war. But they don't want it to disappear, because they use that law and order campaign to expand power and tighten the screws, which then, of course, are setting off these off-kilter people, and then which then leads to calls for gun control and so forth. So, in other words, the problem we face in this country are the systems, the status systems under which we're suffering. But there's a way out. I mean, that's the good news. I mean, that's libertarianism. That's what, changed the course of my life. Even if Americans don't want to go down the libertarian route, there's some kind of peace, inner peace that comes with understanding why all this is happening, and that knowing that there's a way out. And that way out is to dismantle these status systems, leaving a genuinely free society, one with a limited government republic, a free market system, a private property order, where people are free to engage in any activity they want, including ingesting drugs or alcohol, tobacco, as long as they don't initiate force or fraud against another person. That doesn't make it a good decision, but it's something that we say, leave it to the private sector, Alcoholics Anonymous, drug rehab programs, and so forth. Get the government out of this. In other words, separate the state and the economy, the way our ancestors separated church and state. Separate the peaceful activity from the state, and leave government solely focused on punishing violent people, murderers, rapists, thieves, and restore a limited government republic with a non-interventionist foreign policy, which means dismantling the national security establishment and its killing machine. That's Trump Watch for this week. Thank you all for tuning in, and thanks for your great support. Oh, one more thing. We'll be launching our new Civil Liberties series starting next week. It's going to be substituting or sort of part of our Libertarian Angle series. We got a great lineup of speakers. Starts next week. Be sure to look forward. Thank you very much for your attention, and thanks for your great support of FFA.